Before we begin, drop a comment below with your country and what time it is right now where you're watching. Whether it's sunrise in Nairobi, midnight in New York, afternoon in Canada, or evening in France. I want to know. Don't just sit back. Tell me where in the world you are. Now, let's dive into the story. The first shot cracked through the canyon like thunder from a wrathful sky. Jethro Carter had just stepped out of the smokehouse, a slab of jerky in one hand, when the sound sent birds flying and his heart into a sprint. For a second he froze. Then came the second shot, closer, sharper, final. His boots slammed the dirt before the jerky hit the floor. Dust rose behind him as he sprinted toward the barn, lungs burning, gut twisted into a knot of dread. He knew, even before he saw the blood soaking the dirt, even before he saw the familiar work boots lying still, he knew his father was gone. Elias Carter had raised them with calloused hands, quiet wisdom, and the kind of strength only old pain could forge. But now, the man who once carried both boys on his shoulders after a double shift lay face down in blood, still clutching the hammer he never let go of. One boot was missing. That somehow made it worse. Like even death had stripped something from him. Jethro dropped to his knees and let out a raw, cracked cry. It echoed across the fields, but no one answered. Just silence and blood. The barn door swung wider behind him. Heavy footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Isaac Carter emerged from the shadows, rifle gripped like it was an extension of his bones. He didn't say a word at first, just looked at the body. His jaw tightened. His eyes didn't blink. He walked forward, kneeling beside Jethro, and placed a steadying hand on his brother's shoulder. "You saw anyone?" Jethro asked, voice hoarse, barely holding together. Isaac shook his head. "But there were tracks," he muttered. "Multiple horses. Big ones. They came for him." The sun caught the tears pooling in Jethro's eyes as he clenched his fists. Isaac leaned in closer. "We ain't just burying him, Jeth. We're gonna dig for the truth first." Jethro looked up, breathing ragged. Isaac's voice turned colder. "And when we find out who did it, we kill them all." Neither of them had said the word murder, but it was there, thick in the air like gunpowder smoke. The Carter boys had grown up in the dust, forged in hardship, but this was a different kind of pain. A kind that didn't just make you cry. It made you dangerous. They buried Elias Carter by lantern light that night. Just the two of them. No preacher. No guests. No final hymns. Just the wind, the dirt, and the low creak of the shovel digging into unforgiving ground. Jethro worked in silence, his hands raw and trembling. Isaac didn't cry. He didn't speak. He just dug. When the grave was deep enough, they laid their father in without a coffin. There hadn't been time or money for one. Elias had always said, "Put me back in the dirt I came from." So they did. After the last mound of earth was patted down, Isaac placed their father's old revolver on the fresh grave. It gleamed silver under the moonlight. "He told me once," Isaac said, barely above a whisper. "This gun saved his life in Dust Creek back in '72. Now maybe it'll help us avenge his death." Jethro stepped back, chest rising and falling fast. "You think it was the Hollow Jack gang?" Isaac's jaw tightened. "No, they'd brag. Whoever did this, they wanted him gone quiet. Which means it's personal." Then quietly, "We're not just sons anymore. We're the last Carters." By sunrise, the barn had become a war room. The brothers laid out every scrap of paper their father had kept hidden. Old receipts, a burned map, letters signed only with an R. Isaac scanned through them like a hunter reading tracks. Jethro found a blood-stained notebook tucked behind the feed bags. Inside were names. Dozens of them. Names of ranchers, traders, lawmen, all crossed out except 3. Jethro swallowed hard. Why would Pa keep a list like this? Isaac stared hard at the last name. Marshall Colgrave. Because he was hunting something, Isaac muttered. Or someone. A creak on the porch snapped their heads toward the window. A young boy, barefoot, no older than 10, stood holding a torn envelope. "This came yesterday," he said, eyes darting. "Said it was important." Isaac opened the envelope. Inside was a single sentence. He found out too much. No signature. No return address. Just enough to set their hearts on fire. "We ride tonight," Isaac said, grabbing his saddlebag. Jethro didn't argue. The time for grieving was over. The time for vengeance had begun. As dusk painted the horizon in shades of fire, the Carter brothers mounted their horses, armed with grief, rage, and their father's secrets. The wind carried dust across the fields, whispering through the grass like a warning. Isaac rode ahead, his back straight, eyes fixed on the mountains beyond. Jethro followed close, heart pounding like war drums. Somewhere out there, the men who killed Elias Carter were counting on silence, on fear. But they hadn't expected what came next. Not 2 broken sons. Not the ghosts they were about to wake. Not the blood oath they'd made over a fresh grave. The trail ahead would lead them into outlaw country, where the law was cheap, bullets spoke louder than judges, and no mercy was given to boys who cried. But the Carters weren't boys anymore, and they weren't looking for mercy. As they crossed the ridge and disappeared into the trees, the last light of the day fell over the grave behind them. The wind shifted. Somewhere far off, a raven screamed. Vengeance had begun to ride, and it carried the Carter name. They rode through the night, shadows dancing across their faces as the moon cast long silver lines across the dry dirt trail. Isaac led, rifle strapped across his back, jaw locked tight like a gate keeping his pain inside. Jethro followed close, hand never far from the revolver on his hip. Every sound, the snap of a branch, the cry of an owl, made his nerves twitch. Dust Creek was still half a day's ride away, but the silence between the brothers carried the weight of years. When they were boys, they used to dream of leaving the ranch and becoming legends like the Outlaws in their father's stories. Now those dreams tasted like ash. As dawn stretched over the hills, they stopped beside an old well to water the horses. Jethro broke the silence. "What if we ain't ready for this?" Isaac didn't answer at first. He just looked west, toward the rising sun. "Pa didn't raise us to run." A beat passed. Then quietly, "If we turn back now, we might as well dig 2 more graves." Jethro looked down at his reflection in the water. "Then we ride." Neither of them knew what waited in Dust Creek, but they knew who they were now. Dust Creek wasn't on most maps for a reason. It was a place forgotten by law, remembered only by the desperate and the damned. The town sat in a valley choked by sandstone cliffs, where outlaws drank without fear and lawmen came to disappear. When the Carter brothers reached its outskirts, the sun was high and the streets baked in heat. Men with dust-covered hats and rifles leaning against saloon doors watched them pass like wolves eyeing wounded prey. Isaac kept his eyes forward, his voice low. "We don't talk unless we have to. Watch their hands, not their eyes." Jethro nodded, his heart thudding louder with each hoofbeat. They tied their horses outside the rusted spur, a crooked saloon with bullet holes in the windows and a broken swinging sign. Inside, it was dim and smoky, the air thick with whiskey, sweat, and the kind of silence that comes when strangers walk into a room full of secrets. A barkeep with a lazy "I froze" mid-wipe. A poker table stopped clattering. Isaac stepped forward, voice firm. "We're looking for a man named Colgrave." Someone at the far end of the bar dropped a glass. And that's when the whispers started. The name Colgrave wasn't just a name in Dust Creek. It was a curse, a warning, a weight. The moment it left Isaac's mouth, tension wrapped the room like barbed wire. An older man near the fireplace stood slowly, fingers trembling. He had a limp, a faded army coat, and eyes that looked like they'd seen the devil and lived to warn others. "You boys ain't from here," he said, voice rough as gravel. "And if you're looking for Marshal Colgrave, you best ride on. Fast." Isaac stepped forward. He killed off father. The room sucked in a breath. The old man's gaze sharpened. "Then you best dig your graves tonight." Jethro's hand twitched toward his gun. Isaac stopped him. "Why?" he asked. "Because Colgrave ain't just a man," the old-timer whispered. "He owns half this town and bleeds the other half. You think you're the first to come looking for revenge? You'll end up like the rest. Hung from the widow tree, eyes open, mouths full of sand." He turned away. "Leave before you join them." But Isaac didn't move. His voice was cold steel. "We didn't come this far to leave empty-handed." Somewhere outside, a wind kicked up. The storm was beginning. They rented a room above the saloon, a narrow space with one broken window and creaky floorboards. The door had no lock. Isaac sat at the small table, maps and papers spread out, circling the name Colgrave with a charcoal stub. "He's not just a marshal. He's the judge, jury, and executioner here," Isaac muttered. "Pa knew something Colgrave wanted buried." Jethro paced behind him, fists clenched. "So what now? Just march into his office and call him out." Isaac looked up, eyes dark. "We don't play by their rules. We make our own." That night, they moved like ghosts through the back alleys of Dust Creek, listening, watching, gathering names. A stable boy told them Colgrave met with someone called the Reverend every week behind the old chapel. A drunk whispered about secret shipments that left town before dawn. No manifest, no records. And a woman, eyes blackened, voice shaking, told them about men who disappeared after asking the wrong questions. Every thread pointed to something bigger than a murder. Elias Carter had uncovered something buried beneath this town, and the men who buried it would kill to keep it that way. But Isaac and Jethro weren't here for justice. They were here for truth and blood. By dawn, their plan was set. They would follow the Reverend, find where he met Colgrave, and drag the truth into the light, whatever it cost. But as they prepared to leave, a knock hit their door like a warning. 3 soft taps. Then silence. Isaac opened it with his revolver drawn. A small girl stood there, barefoot, maybe 8 years old, wearing a dress too thin for the cold. In her tiny hand, she held a folded note. She said nothing, just handed it to Isaac and ran. He unfolded it slowly. The handwriting was clean, sharp. "You're already being watched. Turn back now, or we bury what's left of you next to your daddy." Jethro's face went pale. "How did they? They never stopped watching," Isaac whispered. He looked out the window at the waking town, at the quiet men leaning against posts, the saloon keeper sweeping nothing, the buzzards circling too low. "This town is the coffin. Colgrave's just the nail." Jethro gripped his gun tighter. "Then let's break the lid off." And without another word, the brothers stepped into the morning sun, ready to go deeper into the mouth of the beast. The war had begun. Dust Creek would never be the same. At the edge of Dust Creek, past the abandoned chapel and down a crooked trail of hoofprints and dried blood, stood a gnarled cottonwood tree. Its limbs stretched out like the fingers of a dead god, twisted, cracked, and heavy with silence. Locals called it the widow tree, not because it had seen mourning, but because it made widows. 13 men had been hanged there, their boots left dangling as warnings. That's where the Carter brothers found themselves before dawn, crouched behind a rusted wagon, watching. A lantern flickered beneath the tree. 2 horses, 3 men. One wore a black duster and hat so wide it could block the moon. The other 2 stood behind him like shadows. Then came the 4th, a man in robes, the Reverend. Jethro sucked in a sharp breath. "That's him." Isaac steadied his scope. The Reverend and the man in black exchanged a briefcase and a handshake. No words, just silence and a transfer. Then they vanished. Isaac exhaled. That man in black. That's Colgrave. Jethro's pulse pounded. What the hell was in that case? Isaac stood slowly. Whatever it wasn't holy. We're not just hunting killers now. We're hunting men who sell hell to the highest bidder. They waited until the town was asleep again. Only dogs barking and drunkards stumbling through the alleys. Then, silent as breath, they broke into the chapel. It creaked like it was built on bones. The pews were empty, the altar stripped bare. But behind it, hidden behind a false panel, they found the Reverend's ledger. Isaac opened it slowly. Jethro leaned over his shoulder, heart beating like a drum. Inside, lists of payments, initials, and locations scrawled in perfect black ink. One name repeated. E. Carter. Isaac froze. Pa was on the payroll? Jethro shook his head. No. Look closer. Next to his name. Refused marked. Isaac's stomach turned. Their father hadn't joined them. He'd stood against them. And they'd marked him for it. Jethro clenched his fists. They tried to buy him. And when he said no, they silenced him. The final page was blank. Except for a single line. Judgment rides Friday. Widow Tree. Isaac slammed the book shut. They're planning another hanging. Someone else is marked. Jethro looked around the dark chapel. How many people in this town are trapped under this? Isaac whispered. Too many. And for the first time, Jethro understood. This wasn't revenge anymore. This was war. They returned to the saloon room to find the door wide open and the lantern inside smashed. The air felt colder. Jethro reached for his gun. You see that? Isaac moved first, clearing the corners. They've been here. The maps were gone. The journal. Every scrap of evidence. The only thing left was their father's revolver on the floor. Emptied, its chamber open like a warning. Then came the sound. A boot step. The groan of a floorboard. Isaac swung his rifle toward the window just as a figure bolted. The chase began. Through the alleys, over barrels, past sleeping dogs they ran. Jethro tackled the stranger near the old tannery. Dust rose. The figure screamed. A woman, mid-30s, ragged dress, eyes wide with fear. Please, she begged. I didn't take anything. I just wanted the book. Isaac narrowed his eyes. Who are you? Name's Mercy, she said. I used to keep the books for the Reverend. I ran when I saw what they did to the others. Jethro stood. You know who's next? She nodded, tears welling. A sheriff's son. He found out. And now they're gonna hang him like they did the rest. Isaac stepped back. Then we've got 2 days to stop it. The next morning, Dust Creek felt even more dangerous. Every stair held questions. Every door that creaked felt like it might never open again. The brothers split up. Isaac rode out to the canyon rim where the sheriff's homestead sat like a forgotten tomb, while Jethro stayed in town, tailing Mercy through side alleys to find the boy. Isaac reached the house just as the sheriff was loading a wagon. Sheriff Eben was older, gray-bearded, with eyes like broken glass. You the Carter boy? He asked, voice low. Isaac nodded. I know what they're planning. Eben shook his head. You don't know the half. My son. He found their route, the one they used to run weapons through the church. Colgrave found out. Told me if I didn't turn him over, they'd kill us both. Isaac stared. Then why haven't you left? Eben's hands trembled. Because I was once one of them. You think this town got this way overnight? He handed Isaac a folded map. This marks where they bury the bodies. Yours might end up there too. Isaac tucked it away. Not if we stop them first. Back in town, Jethro spotted a pale-faced boy hiding inside an old feed room. Mercy whispered. The boy was no older than 15. Freckles, thin frame. Eyes too tired for someone so young. He said nothing as Jethro approached, just stared, breathing shallow, clutching something in his hand. It was a locket. Inside, a drawing of his mother. "They're gonna kill me," he said flatly. "Like they did the others." Jethro crouched beside him. "Not if we get you out first." Mercy shook her head. "They'll expect that. There's eyes everywhere." Jethro nodded slowly. "Then we give them something else to look at." That night, Isaac returned with news of the secret trail, the burial sites, and the plan to hang the sheriff's son at sundown on Friday in front of the town. It would be public. A message. Isaac looked at Jethro. "We do it tomorrow night, before they get the noose around his neck." Jethro cracked his knuckles. "We burn it all down." And as the brothers prepared their weapons, checked their maps, and whispered their father's name one more time, something in the town shifted. A storm was building. Dust Creek didn't know it yet, but the Carter brothers were about to make sure no one ever forgot the name Elias Carter again. The plan was simple, or at least it needed to look simple. Jethro would create the distraction. Isaac would move the boy. Mercy would signal when the road to Widow Tree was clear. But plans don't stay simple in Dust Creek. Not when eyes watched from every rooftop and whispers carried like bullets. That morning, the Carter brothers stood at their father's grave one last time. The sky was bruised with storm clouds, the kind that felt like the land itself was holding its breath. Isaac knelt and placed a bullet on the grave, one he'd carved their father's initials into with a dull knife. "We're not coming back until this is finished," he muttered. Jethro placed his hand on the dirt, eyes stinging. "I hope you can see us, Pa." By midday, they were back in town, moving through shadows, splitting up. Jethro headed to the water tower. From there, he'd cause the explosion, not to kill, but to scream loud enough that every gun in town turned its attention. Isaac took to the tunnels beneath the chapel, a forgotten path carved decades ago during the railway build. He'd use it to sneak the boy out. The trap was ready. Now it just needed bait. Jethro climbed the old ladder rung by rung, heart pounding in his ears. He had 2 sticks of dynamite strapped inside a tobacco tin, a long fuse, and a dead man's prayer. Dust Creek's water tower leaned like an old drunk, rusted and loud, but it had one perfect view, straight into the town square and the Widow Tree. Below, townsfolk wandered, pretending it was just another Friday. But their eyes kept drifting toward the gallows being rebuilt. A fresh rope swayed in the wind. Jethro reached the top, unwrapped the fuse with trembling fingers, and stared out over the town that murdered his father. "You're gonna hear us now," he whispered. With a match in his mouth and fire in his chest, he struck the fuse and ducked. Seconds ticked like years. Then, boom! The tower exploded in a blast of metal and smoke. People screamed. Horses bucked. The gallows cracked in half. Every outlaw guarding the square turned their rifles toward the plume of smoke. And right beneath their feet, in the chaos, Isaac was crawling through the tunnel with the sheriff's boy in tow. "Keep low. Don't breathe," Isaac whispered. Above them, Dust Creek lost its grip on control. Isaac emerged behind the old stables, covered in soot, the boy close behind. Mercy met them there, her hand trembling, but steady on the pistol she'd never used before. "No eyes on this side," she whispered. "They're still chasing the smoke." Isaac nodded. "Let's move." They kept to the edges, ducking through laundry lines and storage sheds. But just as they reached the edge of town, a shadow stepped out from behind a wagon. Colgrave, hat tilted, rifle aimed. His smile was slow and poisonous. "Now that's what I call an entrance," he drawled. "Shame it ends here." Isaac pushed the boy behind him, hands up. "You kill us now, people will start asking questions." Colgrave laughed. "People don't ask questions here, son. They survive. And survivors keep their mouths shut." Behind him, two more men emerged, outlaws with black vests and dead eyes. "Hand the boy over. Take your beating like men." Isaac slowly lowered his hands, then flicked a glance at Mercy. She caught it. Her hand slipped behind her coat. "You first," Isaac said, and Mercy drew and fired. The shot hit the outlaw's knee. Screams. Chaos. Isaac tackled Colgrave. "Run," he shouted. The boy bolted. Dust Creek turned into fire and thunder once again. The fight spilled into the dirt road like a saloon brawl from hell. Isaac slammed Colgrave into a trough, fists flying. Mercy ducked behind crates, reloading fast as bullets shattered windows around her. Jethro, hearing the gunfire, came running from the tower ruins, smoke still clinging to his jacket. He slid behind a barrel and spotted Isaac locked in hand-to-hand with Colgrave, blood already running from both men's mouths. One of the other outlaws raised a rifle at Isaac, but Jethro dropped him with a single shot. "Isaac!" Jethro shouted. His brother kicked Colgrave off him, grabbed the dropped rifle, and aimed. But Colgrave, slick as oil, rolled and vanished into the alley behind the post office. Isaac cursed. "He's running!" Jethro rushed to him, panting. "You good?" Isaac nodded, face bruised. "We got the boy out?" Mercy stepped forward, bloody but alive. "He's with the sheriff. Gone into the canyons." Jethro exhaled hard. Isaac looked toward the alley. "We ain't done. Colgrave doesn't run. He's planning something." Jethro nodded. "Then let's finish this." They turned, hearts pounding, toward the alley. Dust Creek wasn't quiet anymore. The storm had come, and it carried the Carter name like thunder. By nightfall, the town was broken. Smoke curled from rooftops, gunshots echoed in memories, and the widow tree stood with its rope coiled uselessly on the ground. But the Carter brothers weren't celebrating. Colgrave was gone, escaped, like a ghost slipping through cracks. Isaac sat on the chapel steps, knuckles raw, jaw clenched. "We failed," he muttered. "He'll rebuild, regroup." Jethro crouched beside him. "We saved the boy. We tore down the gallows. That ain't nothing." Mercy approached slowly. "You rattled them. Bad. Folks saw you fight back. You gave 'em hope." Isaac looked up. "Hope doesn't bury monsters." Mercy reached into her coat and pulled out something, a key. This was Colgrave's. "Found it near the trough. Fits the vault under the freight station. That's where the Reverend hides their records." Isaac took it, fire returning to his eyes. "Then that's where we go next." Jethro looked west. "He won't stop until he's bled this land dry." Isaac stood. "Then we'll be there when he does." The wind howled through the empty streets. The brothers mounted their horses, and as the town watched from behind curtains and broken windows, they rode off again. Not because the war was over, but because it had only just begun. The freight station stood silent on the edge of Dust Creek, a long wooden skeleton of a building with splintered boards and rusted tracks that hadn't seen a train in years. Beneath it, hidden by time and silence, was a vault. The key Mercy handed them felt heavier than iron. It was Elias Carter's last breadcrumb, and maybe the truth buried with it could burn the whole town to the ground. Isaac crouched behind a stack of barrels while Jethro circled the perimeter. The night was moonless, which helped, but the creaks in the boards echoed like screams. They found the vault door beneath the station's platform, low to the ground, part of a half-collapsed cellar. The key slid in like it belonged. Isaac hesitated before turning it. "What if what we find doesn't fix anything?" Jethro looked him dead in the eye. "Then we burn it anyway." With a click, the lock gave way. Inside, a narrow staircase led into pitch black. The air stank of mold and old paper. Isaac lit a lantern, and they descended, rifles ready. What waited at the bottom wasn't gold or guns. It was worse. Files. Dozens. maybe hundreds. Names, dates, payments. And stamped across the top of each one, property of Marshall Colgrave. Jethro flipped through the papers with trembling hands. Each file detailed a person, where they lived, what they owned, who they were related to, and what was taken from them. Some were ranchers, others farmers. Some were just travelers passing through. All were marked with a red X and a dollar amount. Isaac growled. These weren't arrests. These were executions with price tags. He found a folder marked Elias Carter. Inside were photographs of Elias talking with the sheriff's son, meeting with townsfolk, writing something in a notebook. The last page was a letter addressed to R. Isaac read aloud. If you get this, it means I'm dead. Don't let them win. Dust Creek was never theirs to poison. Isaac stared at the signature. He knew this would happen. Jethro's jaw clenched. That ledger in the chapel? Just the surface. This is the rot beneath. They packed the files into their saddlebags. As they turned to leave, Isaac froze. Footsteps. Slow. Calculated. You boys found something that wasn't yours. A voice drawled from the shadows. Colgrave. He stepped into the lantern light, flanked by 2 armed men. Drop your guns. You're not walking out of here alive. Isaac didn't hesitate. He shot the lantern. The room exploded into darkness. Gunfire erupted. Sparks flashed. Jethro dove behind a crate, firing blind, heart hammering. Colgrave's voice echoed like a serpent's hiss. This is how your daddy died too, you know. Cornered. Afraid. Isaac shouted. You talk too much. Another shot rang out. A scream. One of Colgrave's men dropped. The second charged forward, swinging a blade. Jethro caught him mid-lunge, tackling him into the shelves. Papers flew. The sound of boots slamming stairs echoed through the vault. Colgrave was retreating. He's running again. Jethro shouted. No, he's luring us. Isaac replied. But they didn't stop. They gave chase, boots slamming up the stairs, out into the freezing night air. Colgrave vanished into the rail yard. A train engine, long dead, offered cover. Isaac crept around it, rifle raised. You don't have to die here, Colgrave called. You could join me. Same as your father almost did. Jethro fired. A spark flew from the rail. He'd rather rot in the ground than stand with you. Colgrave laughed, then vanished again. They searched for hours. Nothing, only silence, and the sound of wind over the tracks. The snake had slipped away. Again, they returned to Mercy's shack just before dawn, exhausted, hollow-eyed, and dragging saddlebags full of proof. Mercy stared at the folders like they were corpses. This is enough to bury him, she whispered. Isaac slumped into a chair. Not if he buries us first. Jethro looked around the one-room shack, its peeling walls, and the lantern barely holding a flame. We need help. Real help. Mercy nodded slowly. There's one man, used to ride with Colgrave. He broke off before the town fell. Lives up in Widow's Bluff. Name's Finch. Isaac blinked. Why hasn't he come back? Because Colgrave killed his brother and told him he'd be next if he ever stepped foot in Dust Creek again. Jethro stood. Then it's time he broke that silence. They left that afternoon, riding north into the hills. The higher they climbed, the colder the air. Widow's Bluff rose like a stone giant, casting long shadows over the valley. They found Finch's cabin behind a thicket of pine, smoke curling from the chimney. A grizzled man answered, rifle in hand, face like weathered granite. If you're here to talk, you better talk fast. Isaac held up the folder marked Carter, Elias. He killed our father. And yours is next. Finch stepped aside without a word. Inside, the cabin was small but strong. Heavy logs. Iron stove. No pictures. Just weapons and silence. Finch read the file slowly, jaw tightening with every line. "He kept records?" he muttered. "Damn fool always thought he was untouchable." Jethro paced. "We've got one shot. People are scared, but if they see Colgrave exposed, if they see what he really is, they'll turn." Finch finally looked up. "You're right, but that means getting the truth in front of the right eyes." He pulled a leather-bound book from beneath the floorboards. "This is my ledger. Matches yours. Names, dates, payouts. One of them is a federal marshal from Arizona. If we ride hard, we can meet him in 2 days. If he sees this, he'll send troops." Isaac nodded. "Then let's ride." Finch grinned. "Been a long time since I saddled up for justice." As the sun dipped below the horizon, 3 men rode out from Widow's Bluff, with evidence on their backs and fire in their veins. Dust Creek had drawn first blood. But now, for the first time, the Carter brothers had something sharper than vengeance. They had the truth, and truth, they'd learned, was a weapon too. They rode through dust storms and canyon winds, 3 shadows slicing across the wilderness like a blade. Isaac, Jethro, and Finch didn't speak much. The road between Widow's Bluff and the Arizona border was long, treacherous, and watched. Every ridge felt like a trap. Every vulture overhead felt like a warning. But they pressed on, clutching the files tighter than their rifles. Near sundown on the second day, they reached a town called Dry Lantern, a settlement smaller than Dust Creek, but louder with gossip. The federal marshal, Aaron Blythe, was due to arrive on the midnight stagecoach. They took rooms in the saloon and waited. Finch cleaned his rifle in silence, while Isaac reread their father's file for the 10th time. Jethro sat near the window, scribbling something into a folded piece of paper. Isaac noticed. "What's that?" Jethro didn't look up. "Letter to Pa. Just things I never said." Isaac nodded once, his voice gravel-thick. He'd be proud. Outside, the stagecoach rattled into town under the stars. A tall man in a dark blue coat stepped down, badge shining, eyes sharp. Finch stood. "That's Blythe." Isaac exhaled. Time to find out if the law still means something in the West. Marshal Blythe sat across from them in the back room of the saloon, listening without interrupting. The Carter brothers laid out every document, every photo, every name. Blythe said nothing for a long time. Then finally, he leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "I've heard rumors about Dust Creek for years. But this is different." He tapped a folder labeled Carter, Elias. "This your father?" Isaac nodded. "Colgrave had him killed. We don't just want justice. We want him gone." Blythe narrowed his eyes. "You're asking me to start a war." "No," Jethro said. "The war's already started. We're asking you to help end it." Blythe looked at Finch. "You were one of his." Finch didn't flinch. "I walked away when I saw what he became. I should have come forward years ago. But fear makes cowards of honest men." Blythe stood slowly. "I'll telegraph my office. If this checks out, I'll bring men by week's end." Isaac stepped forward. "He won't wait. He'll smell us coming." Blythe paused, then turned. "Then let's make him come to you." Isaac frowned. "How?" Blythe smiled coldly. "We publish this." He lifted the Carter file. "Truth is best delivered loud." By morning, copies of Elias Carter's file were nailed to church doors, tavern walls, and trading posts across the Dust Creek region. In bold red ink, "Proof of corruption, Marshal Colgrave exposed." The townspeople of Dry Lantern gathered in silence, reading every word. Some turned away. Others whispered. Some wept. Jethro stood nearby, fists tight, waiting for a bullet that never came. Inside the saloon, Finch paced. If Colgrave sees this, he'll either flee or retaliate. Isaac gritted his teeth. He doesn't run. He strikes. Blythe sent 2 men to the telegraph office, one to scout the main trail back into Dust Creek, Then he turned to Isaac. We go public like this, people will die. You ready for that? Isaac looked to his brother, then to Finch, then back at the marshal. People are already dying. We're just finally giving them a reason to fight. Just then, a messenger burst into the saloon, breathless. It's Colgrave, he gasped. He sent word. Isaac grabbed the note. It was scrawled in black ink. You want a reckoning? Come get it. Widow Tree. 3 days. Noon. Isaac looked up. He wants to end this where he started it. Blythe's voice dropped. Then we bring the rope. 3 days crawled by like years. Every second felt borrowed. Isaac and Jethro trained with Blythe's men, drilled ambushes, rehearsed fallback plans. Finch mapped every alley, every rooftop, every place a bullet could fly from. Mercy arrived the second night, battered from the road but alive. People are rising, she said. They're scared, but they're angry too. Isaac handed her a rifle. Then let them aim that anger. On the third morning, the Widow Tree stood like a judge in a courtroom. Dust Creek Square, once quiet, now brimmed with townsfolk. Some held pitchforks. Some held tears. Most had never dared look Colgrave in the eye. Until now. Noon came. The sun stood straight overhead. And then he arrived. Colgrave rode in slowly, flanked by 12 men. Black dusters. Cold eyes. Behind them, the Reverend. The outlaw army halted 20 feet from the crowd. Colgrave dismounted. His smile was all teeth. So, this is the rebellion. Blythe stepped forward, badge shining. Drop your weapons. You're under arrest for murder, theft, conspiracy, and treason. Colgrave laughed. You brought a badge to a gunfight. Isaac raised his rifle. No, we brought something else. The townsfolk parted, and behind them stood 20 more armed citizens. We brought everyone you hurt. The standoff held for 10 burning seconds. Wind hissed through dry grass. Fingers hovered over triggers. And then, a sound broke it. One of Colgrave's men, a young rider, barely 20, lowered his gun. I didn't sign up for this, he muttered. Another dropped his rifle. Then another. 3 outlaws broke ranks and stepped back. The Reverend snarled, raising his shotgun, but Mercy shot it clean from his hands. Chaos erupted. Gunfire thundered. Colgrave dived for cover behind a wagon. Isaac chased him. Jethro fought through the smoke, dodging bullets, dragging wounded townsfolk to safety. Finch took a round in the shoulder, but kept firing. Blythe's men moved in formation, pressing the outlaws back. And in the middle of it all, Colgrave ran, through the chapel, out the back, and toward the hills. Isaac followed, breath ragged, boots pounding dirt. He tackled Colgrave beneath the tree line. They rolled, fists flying. Blood, mud, teeth. You killed him, Isaac growled. He chose the wrong side, Colgrave spat. Isaac pinned him, gun to temple. You don't get to speak his name. But before the trigger pulled, Blythe stepped in, rifle aimed. He stands trial. That's the justice your father died for. Isaac's hands shook. Then he stood. Colgrave would hang. Not from rage, but from truth. 3 days after the battle, Dust Creek was no longer the same town. The Widow Tree still stood, but the noose had been removed, and for the first time in years, its branches swayed freely in the wind. Marshal Blythe had taken command, using the Carter files and Finch's ledger to issue formal arrests. Those who had lived under Colgrave's shadow began to speak, some out of guilt, others out of sheer relief. Isaac and Jethro helped bury the dead. Not just the townsfolk, but the outlaws too. Even the rotten returned to dirt, Finch muttered, wrapping a bloodied body in burlap. The Reverend, now imprisoned in the cellar under the chapel, had stopped speaking. Colgrave, though bruised and shackled, still smiled when people looked away. You think you've won, he sneered to Isaac one morning. But I planted seeds in this town that won't die easy. Isaac didn't reply. He didn't need to. He had something Colgrave would never feel again. Honor. That night, Jethro sat by the fire, reading aloud the letter he'd written to their father. "We're still here, Pa. We ain't perfect, but we fought back, and we didn't lose who we are." His voice cracked. "I hope that counts for something." The trial was held in the open square, where Colgrave had once ruled through fear. Now, surrounded by townsfolk and federal officers, he faced a jury of the same people he'd bled dry. Marshal Blythe stood tall beside the judge, reading the charges. Unlawful executions, land seizures, bribery, conspiracy, murder. Colgrave, ever smug, leaned back in his chair, chains rattling. "All these folks just want someone to blame," he spat. "They came to me for protection." But Finch stepped forward next, placing his hand on the Bible. His voice was clear. "He didn't protect us. He poisoned us. I know because I helped him build it." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Mercy followed, testifying to what she'd seen in the chapel vault. Isaac and Jethro took the stand last. Jethro spoke about Elias, the man who refused to be bought. "My father gave this town everything. They murdered him for telling the truth." Isaac held up their father's revolver, the initials EC still scratched into the barrel. He carried this till his last breath. Not to kill, to protect. The courtroom fell into silence. The judge, pale and shaking, whispered the words everyone had waited to hear. "Marshal Elias Colgrave is sentenced to death by hanging." At dawn, the night before the execution, Jethro found Isaac sitting alone on the chapel steps, staring at the sky. "You okay?" he asked. Isaac didn't answer at first. "I thought this would feel like justice. It just feels empty." Jethro sat beside him. "It won't bring him back." Isaac nodded slowly. "But maybe it keeps someone else from being buried in his place." They watched the stars in silence. Finch joined them a little later, his arm in a sling. "I never thought I'd see Dust Creek quiet again," he said. "Now I don't know what to do with the silence." Mercy came with a tray of coffee, passing it around like communion. "Maybe now it's time to build," she said. "Not run." Jethro sipped slowly. "You think the town's ready for that?" Mercy smiled softly. "We don't get ready. We just start." The firelight flickered against the chapel walls. Isaac leaned his head back. "Then tomorrow, we end it. And after that, we begin again." That night, the brothers didn't sleep. They sat outside, shoulder to shoulder, as the night passed quietly, without screams, gunshots, or footsteps in the dark. Just wind, just stars, just the peace their father had died hoping for. At dawn, the town gathered. It wasn't a spectacle. There was no cheering, no celebration, just the heavy silence of people watching something ugly being laid to rest. The gallows had been rebuilt, not as a symbol of fear, but of reckoning. Colgrave was led out by 2 officers. He was thinner, slower, but his eyes still burned with that cruel fire. "You think this ends me?" he said to Isaac. "I was the only thing keeping the wolves out." Isaac didn't flinch. "You were the wolf." Jethro stood nearby, revolver holstered, hands steady. The judge read the sentence again. Blythe gave the nod, and the rope tightened. One breath, then none. Colgrave's body swung as the sun rose behind him. It wasn't joy the town felt, but release. Afterward, no one spoke. They simply walked away, one by one, to rebuild whatever parts of themselves they still had left. Isaac and Jethro remained until the ropes stopped moving. Finch removed his hat. Let that be the last body buried in this town without dignity. Mercy lit a candle inside the chapel, placing it beside a photo of Elias Carter she'd drawn from memory. "He didn't die for nothing," she whispered. He lit the match. The Carter brothers didn't ride out immediately. They stayed to help, repaired broken fences, patched up the schoolhouse, taught the children how to shoot straight, not to kill, but to survive. Isaac was offered a deputy's badge. He turned it down. "I've had enough of titles." Jethro taught Mercy how to ride. Laughed again for the first time in years. Sometimes, they visited their father's grave and sat without saying a word. One day, a passing rider asked Isaac if the stories were true, if they really took down Colgrave. Isaac just smiled. "We didn't take him down," he said. "The truth did. We just carried it." When it was finally time to go, they left behind the revolver on the widow tree's stump. No need for vengeance anymore. No more ghosts to chase. Just open land and the sound of hooves. As they rode off, the wind kicked up dust in their trail. But this time, it wasn't running from anything. They were riding towards something new. And behind them, Dust Creek stood, bruised but healing, broken but breathing. And somewhere in the sky, if they listened hard enough, they could still hear Elias Carter's voice. "Stand tall, speak truth, and never ride with your head down." The Carter brothers had been gone from Dust Creek for 6 weeks when the letter came. It arrived on the back of a gray mule, carried by a boy no older than 11 with freckles on his cheeks and bare feet caked in road dust. Jethro took the envelope, eyeing the town stamp. Dry lantern. The seal was broken, the ink smudged, but the words inside were sharp as ever. Marshall Blythe gone missing. Finch wounded. Colgrave's men still moving underground. They found something buried beneath Widow Tree. Return fast. The town's bleeding again. Isaac read it twice, then folded it neatly and stuffed it in his coat. "We ride tonight." Jethro didn't argue. They'd hoped the execution was the final nail. But even a severed snake can still bite. They saddled their horses in silence, the sunset casting orange fire across the prairie. "Thought we were done with this," Jethro said as they mounted. Isaac looked west, toward Dust Creek. "So did I. But justice doesn't sleep just because we're tired." The wind shifted. Storm clouds crawled over the horizon like bruises. Jethro pulled the brim of his hat low. "Let's go finish what Pa started." And just like that, they rode back into the fire. When they returned, Dust Creek was colder. Not in temperature, but in spirit. Windows were shuttered tight. Stores closed early. The chapel door hung crooked again. And the widow tree, it had been chopped down. Only a blackened stump remained, scarred and cracked like the town's heart. Mercy met them behind the stable, eyes wide with worry. They came in the night. 5 of them. Not outlaws, worse. Men from Colgrave's deeper circle. The ones who never showed their faces. She led them into the chapel basement, where Finch lay bandaged and pale. A bullet had grazed his ribs. "They weren't here for revenge," he whispered. "They were digging." Isaac leaned in. "Digging for what?" Finch pointed to a rolled-up blueprint beside his cot. "Under the tree. Tunnels, old ones. Something Colgrave never told us about." Mercy added. Before he died, the Reverend kept repeating a phrase. "The vault beneath the bones." We thought he was just raving. But now, Isaac picked up the blueprint, unrolling it on the floor. A maze of tunnels ran beneath Dust Creek like veins under skin. Jethro leaned closer. "That center chamber. It's directly beneath the widow tree." Isaac's jaw tightened. Whatever's down there, they're willing to kill for it. They waited for nightfall. Mercy stayed behind with Finch while Isaac and Jethro entered the tunnels through the collapsed freight cellar. The same vault they'd once used to uncover Colgrave's secrets. But now, deeper in, the earth smelled older. Decay, stone, and something else, like rot that had waited 100 years. The brothers lit 2 lanterns and moved through the tunnel slowly, boots echoing against stone and silence. Jethro spotted a broken pickaxe. Isaac found boot tracks, recent. "They were here," he whispered. "And they found something." As they reached the chamber beneath where the widow tree had stood, They found it. A wide cavern with wooden supports and a collapsed stone wall. In the center lay an iron chest half buried. Its lock was shattered, and it stood slightly open. Isaac stepped forward, heart pounding. Inside were ledgers, bags of silver coins, and, worse, documents older than Dust Creek itself. Charters, land claims, burial records. This ain't just about money, Jethro breathed. This is history, proof that Dust Creek was built on stolen graves. Isaac pulled one record out, a deed naming a native family as rightful owners of the land. Colgrave buried this truth, built over it, killed to protect it. Behind them, footsteps, guns cocked. They weren't alone. 5 men emerged from the shadows. Long coats, scarves over faces, guns drawn. One of them stepped forward, older, with one eye and a silver star pinned crooked to his chest. "You boys just don't know when to quit," he growled. "Colgrave might have been sloppy, but we're not. That chest stays buried." Isaac stepped in front of Jethro, hands raised but steady. "You kill us, more will come. People already know." The man laughed. "People forget. They always do. And we'll make sure of it." Jethro tilted his head. "That why your face is covered?" A pause. The man scowled. "Say goodbye." But before the trigger pulled, a gunshot echoed. Then another. Then another. The tunnel filled with smoke and shouting as Finch and Mercy burst in through a side shaft, rifles blazing. Chaos erupted. Lanterns shattered. Shadows moved. Isaac tackled one man, slamming his head against stone. Jethro wrestled another, grabbing his pistol midair. Finch, bleeding again, held the chamber's entrance, firing like a man with nothing left to lose. Mercy dragged the chest toward the tunnel mouth. "We get this out. We bury them with the truth," she shouted. The final man turned to run, but Isaac grabbed his coat and said coldly, "Not this time." When the dust cleared, the outlaws were gone, dead or unconscious. Mercy and Finch lay slumped against the wall, breathing hard. Isaac and Jethro stood over the chest, its contents scattered, blood spattered across the documents. "We almost lost it," Jethro muttered. Isaac picked up the oldest deed again, folded it carefully, and tucked it into his coat. "But we didn't." They carried the chest out by lantern light, shoulders heavy but eyes sharp. The townsfolk gathered silently as the brothers dragged it into the chapel and placed it at the altar. Isaac opened it for all to see. "These are the bones Dust Creek was built on," he said, "and we won't let them rot underground anymore." An elder stepped forward, hands shaking, eyes glassy. "My grandfather disappeared in 1842. They said he just vanished, but his name's in here." A woman wept. A boy read one of the ledgers aloud. The chapel filled with voices, with memory, with truth. Jethro stepped outside and looked toward the stump where the widow tree once stood. "Looks different without it," Mercy said beside him. "Yeah," Jethro whispered, "but now something better can grow." Isaac joined them, silent. The brothers had returned, but this time they weren't chasing ghosts. They were planting roots. They came at dawn. 12 riders in black, silent as fog, their silhouettes cresting the ridge above Dust Creek like the ghosts of old wars. No warnings, no banners, just vengeance. The last of Colgrave's men, those who'd been hiding in distant canyons, gathering numbers, feeding on rage. Word had reached them about the chest, the trial, the public files. And now they rode not to reclaim the town, but to erase it. Jethro spotted them first, eyes narrowing from the chapel steeple. "They're back," he whispered. "All of them." Isaac stood below, loading rifles with steady hands. "Then this is where it ends." Mercy rang the chapel bell. One long, defiant toll. Townsfolk poured into the square, armed with whatever they had, rakes, pistols, old muskets, even kitchen knives. Finch limped to the front steps, a shotgun in each hand. "We stand together," he barked. "We don't run. Not this time." Isaac climbed atop a wagon, raising his father's revolver high. "They're coming to break us, so we break them first. For Elias Carter, for every name in that chest, and for Dust Creek." The crowd roared, then fell silent. The hoofbeats grew louder. 12 shadows. 1 town. No more running. The first shot came from the ridge, a sharp crack that shattered a water barrel near the blacksmith shop. Then the riders charged, dust rising like smoke behind them. Isaac dropped one from the saddle with a clean shot to the chest. Finch fired next, blasting a second rider from his horse. But the outlaws kept coming, fanning out, surrounding the town square like vultures circling meat. Chaos broke loose. Screams, smoke, gunfire that echoed like thunder. Mercy dragged 2 children behind the chapel, shielding them with her body. Jethro rolled across a rain barrel, firing both pistols at once, hitting one rider in the thigh. Isaac fought like a man with fire in his lungs, pistol in one hand, knife in the other. He ducked, turned, and slammed an outlaw into the side of the chapel. "That's for Pa," he growled, driving the blade home. But they were outnumbered. 2 townsfolk fell. Another outlaw lit a torch and hurled it toward the dry goods store. Flames licked the sky. Finch shouted over the gunfire, "They're pushing us back." Jethro fired again. Click. "Empty. We need to split them," Isaac yelled. "Draw them into alleys. Break their line." And with that, the townspeople scattered into shadows. Into battle. Jethro sprinted toward the stable, dodging bullets, heart thundering. An outlaw tackled him from behind, knocking him into the dirt. They wrestled, choking on dust, fists swinging like hammers. Jethro reached for the nearest thing, his boot knife, and plunged it into the man's shoulder. The outlaw screamed and rolled off, but not before landing a punch to Jethro's ribs. Gasping, Jethro limped to his feet, pistol gone, bleeding from his temple. In the alley beside the butcher's shop, Mercy knelt beside a fallen child, shielding him with her body. An outlaw raised his rifle, but Isaac fired first, dropping him with a headshot. He rushed over. "You all right?" Mercy nodded, face streaked with ash. "I'm not dying today." Together, they moved the boy to cover. Then came the horn, one of the outlaws signaling retreat. But it wasn't retreat. It was regrouping. 5 riders stormed the chapel again, determined to take the chest. Inside, Finch waited. He stood behind the altar, blood seeping from his shirt, both shotguns empty. "Come on, then," he whispered. "Let's meet hell together." The doors burst open. The first man through took a blast to the chest from Finch's hidden pistol. But the second fired. Finch dropped, smiling. Isaac reached the chapel seconds later. The last outlaw inside raised his gun, but Jethro tackled him from behind, slamming him into the pulpit. Isaac knelt beside Finch, blood pooling fast. "You stay with me," he whispered. Finch grinned faintly. "It's a good day to go." His eyes faded before the second breath. Jethro stood, shaking. "The chest's still here." Isaac looked at the bodies around them. "Then so is the truth." Outside, the town square was a smoking mess. But the enemy was broken. 3 outlaws had fled. The rest lay still. Women poured water on the burning store. Men helped the wounded to their feet. The bell in the chapel rang once more, but this time, not in warning. In victory, Isaac climbed atop the steps, bloodied but unbroken. "It's over," he said. "But now comes the real fight. We rebuild. We remember. And we protect this town with the truth we nearly died to uncover." Jethro joined him, voice hoarse. "This town belongs to the people now. Not the fear. Not the shadows. Us." The townsfolk raised their fists. Mercy wept. And above them all, the smoke began to clear, revealing a sky bluer than Dust Creek had seen in years. That night, they buried Finch beside Elias Carter, the two men who never gave up on the soul of the town. Isaac said the words. Jethro placed a coin on the fresh mound, silver, pulled from the outlaw chest. "A man shouldn't have to pay for his courage," he whispered. The graveyard was quiet, save for the sound of hammers echoing from town. People were rebuilding, repainting, reclaiming. Mercy stitched a torn flag that would now hang over the schoolhouse. A small boy dragged a wooden sign across the square and planted it in front of the widow tree's old stump. On it, he wrote in crooked letters, "Truth grows here now." Isaac stared at it for a long time. "We lost so much," he whispered. "But what we have now, it's worth everything." Jethro nodded. "Pa would have stayed, built something from it." Isaac smiled faintly. "Then we stay too. No longer just sons of a murdered man. No longer just orphans." The Carter brothers had become something else entirely. Keepers of the truth. As the stars blinked awake overhead, they stood side by side, watching Dust Creek take its first breath of freedom. One last war behind them. One final chapter ahead. The sun rose over Dust Creek like it hadn't in years, soft golden, warm instead of harsh. It poured over the rooftops, through the broken windows now filled with fresh glass, over the gallows stump now carved into a bench where children sat and shared stories. The Carter brothers walked the length of Main Street in silence, boots echoing softly. For the first time in a long time, it wasn't fear that followed their steps. It was respect. People nodded, smiled. A man sweeping the porch of the general store paused, tipped his hat, and said, "Your pa would have been proud." Jethro smiled, a little surprised at how good it felt to hear it. Isaac glanced at the sign being nailed into the courthouse wall. Elias Carter Hall of Records. It was Mercy's idea. She was inside now, sorting the old ledgers and cleaning off the bloodstains. "Truth needs a home," she'd said. Isaac looked to Jethro. "Feels strange, don't it?" "What?" "Not having someone to chase. Someone to shoot." Jethro laughed. "We'll get used to it." In the breeze, the town breathed again. Not perfect, not whole, but healing. And beneath that sunrise, Dust Creek felt like something they'd never dared believe in again, home. They walked to the grave one last time. Finch's stone stood beside Elias Carter's, etched simply. He stayed. He fought. He mattered. Isaac placed a bullet beside it. Not a live one, but a brass casing. Empty. Fired in the final battle. "You gave us a chance," Isaac said. "We won't waste it." Jethro placed their father's old hat on the grave, the same one he'd found crushed in the dirt. The wind picked it up, turning it slightly, then settling it down, as if even the land recognized the man buried beneath. "I hated you for a while," Jethro whispered. "Hated that you didn't fight harder. Hated that you left us. But now I see it. You did fight. Just in a different way." He blinked fast, but didn't cry. "Not this time. You saved us, Pa. In the end, you saved the whole damn town." Isaac stood beside him, one hand on his brother's shoulder. No more words. Just wind. Just peace. For the first time, the graveyard didn't feel like a place of endings. It felt like a promise. A beginning. The Carter brothers turned to leave. Not as boys anymore. Not even as Avengers. As something rarer. Survivors who chose to stay. Back in town, Mercy had reopened the school. Children gathered for lessons under the same roof that once housed sermons laced with fear. Isaac built the desks himself, sanding them until the splinters stopped biting. Jethro taught the kids how to read trail maps and led them on rides through the hills. Some days, he told stories. Some were true. Some were better left as legends. Mercy became the town's unofficial mayor, though she refused the title. She just made things work. water lines, food shares, even planting seeds in the valley where bodies had once been buried. Growth belongs where pain lived, she said. And slowly, Dust Creek listened. New families arrived. The train whistled again for the first time in years. Trade picked up. No one forgot the blood spilled, but no one let it define them either. They carved benches from broken fences. They planted flowers where bullets once fell. Isaac sat on the chapel steps each evening, polishing his father's revolver. Not to fire it, but to remember it. He never loaded it again. "Let this thing rest," he told Jethro once. "It's done enough." And in the absence of gunfire, laughter returned. Soft at first, then louder, braver. One evening, a rider approached town, coat dusted with travel, saddle worn thin. He asked where he was, and Jethro smiled. "This here's Dust Creek." The rider raised an eyebrow. "Heard stories. Said the town was cursed." Isaac walked up behind him. "We were. Then we decided to do something about it." The rider tipped his hat. "That so?" Isaac nodded. "It's a place of second chances now. If you're looking to make trouble, ride on. If you're looking to make peace, stay a while." The rider looked around. The sky, the people, the chapel, the little girl handing her apple to another boy near the old widow tree stump. He smiled. "Maybe I will." And just like that, another stranger stayed. That became Dust Creek's legacy. Not revenge, not blood, but choosing to stay. Choosing to rebuild. Choosing each other. Isaac wrote letters sometimes, to the federal marshal, to families who'd lost loved ones, to others who needed to know it was possible to fight back without losing yourself. His final letter was to a man buried beneath a cottonwood tree that no longer stood. "You gave us the map, Pa. We just had to find the road." And somehow in the quiet, he knew Elias heard. As night fell over Dust Creek, the lanterns lit one by one. No alarms, no watch posts, just calm. Isaac and Jethro stood at the edge of town, horses saddled, just watching. They could ride if they wanted, chase the next fire, find another town to save. But they didn't move. Jethro looked at his brother. "You ever think we'd live long enough to grow old?" Isaac smiled. "Never. But I'm damn curious to see what it feels like." They tied the horses, walked back to the chapel steps, and sat. Mercy joined them, passing mugs of hot coffee. Below them, Dust Creek glowed. Kids laughing in the square. Old folks playing cards. The sound of hammers building, not breaking. Jethro raised his mug. "To the man who made us stay." Isaac nodded. "To the town he died for." Mercy raised hers last. "To what we built from the ashes." The stars stretched wide across the sky, and the wind carried no threats, only stories. And so the tale of two orphan brothers who rode for blood ended not with more gunfire, but with light, laughter, and the quiet kind of legacy only the brave ever leave behind. The Carter name was never feared again. It was remembered,